Gated communities started around 1996, and they were initiated by the DA party, and the reason being that there was too much crime in the neighborhoods, previously white suburbs. At that time, the new government of the ANC was coming to power, or has just started being in government, and those policies were received with mixed feelings, but eventually adopted. That is the history. They have nothing to do with public housing. Public housing is housing for the poor and the the people who are just starting to acquire housing, who cannot afford, expensive houses like cluster houses and that sort of thing. I think they'll still continue because crime is still, a huge concern in the country. But there's no reason why public housing cannot be gated as well. Spatial exclusion or social marginalization, for me, it's really a function of access to funding or investments um, close to residential areas. If you have the investments, there's no reason why you cannot accommodate people like in places of Soweto, Deep Sloot, and other areas. But because of lack of funding, planners and government end up accommodating people, close to CBDs or within CBDs, so that at least they can accommodate a lot more people. The more you plan for residential areas away from the cities, you will not have funding for services such as infrastructure and the actual building of housing. I may be wrong, but for me, we cannot be, still talking about apartheid planning when we are now in government. We need a political will and people who are really concerned with, delivering housing for the majority in this country. The fact that people are put into positions of planning without being planners and not knowing what to do, the fact that there's corruption and people are misusing, government resources, all those things are affecting, how people are residing in residential areas. And the other thing is, when you go to municipalities, I don't think municipalities are really committed to delivering services. Everywhere where you go, the substandard services being, given to people, and I really think the situation has to change. I may be controversial with this one, but that's what I believe. As a qualified town planner, I worked in Johannesburg between 1996 to 2001, and I spearheaded the making of many policies, including gated communities policy, signage policy, um, and many others. And I was able to influence the IDPs in the sense that stakeholder engagement meetings would be arranged where people of different groups would voice their needs, interests, and preferences with regard to certain policies. It was a very hostile community, but a lot of policies were made during that time, which are influencing the development of planning in many areas of the country. Social inclusivity is very complex to meet. What you need to do is as and when policies are made, you make sure that the majority are well represented so that they can influence the direction of those policies. The other thing is you need to make sure that affirmative action policies are implemented so that at least in terms of government guidelines, you are ensuring that you're not neglecting the very weak in the communities. And you must also make sure that your input and your management input is also well set so that they are integrated in the derivation of policy. With regard to projects, I can cite the All Africa Village in Alexander, River Park development in Alexander, re-roofing projects, and I also can cite N2 Gateway in Cape Town, and also urban renewal in Bushbuck Ridge, where we attempted to make improvements with regard to living conditions of the people who were initially marginalized by apartheid laws, where they stayed very far from cities and amenities. But in the sense of Alexander, there was an issue of people not having accommodation, being accommodated in shacks, and we needed to come up with innovative ways of improving the Alexander suburb, which is not far from Sandton. Those projects were implemented even though it wasn't easy with regard to the approvals of planning applications, approvals of zoning regulations and building regulations. The procedures were very stringent and were based on apartheid era legislation, which has had to be improved over time. Thank you.